each Tuesday evening, I decided to focus particular topic. Last Tuesday, mainly focus on the wisdom, and this Tuesday, night, ethics, and next Tuesday, more in the, what you call the meditation. And as I mentioned last Tuesday, in the teachings of the Buddha, can be look at into these, all entire teachings of the Buddha can be looked at into these three categories. The group of the teachings that Buddha had given, mainly, to his followers, to raise the awareness, to have the better, fuller understanding of the things and events, around them and within themselves, and so forth. And that is more like a wisdom, wisdom. In other words, have a fuller, more, fuller and more deeper understanding of the things and events, the outside as well as inside. And to his followers, the Buddha himself, and to his followers, having that kind of, fuller, better understanding of the things and events is something very crucial for the spiritual journey. And then the tonight's topic, which is the ethics, just understanding, having wisdom of the things and events, just having understanding of the things and events alone will not necessarily, helpful and useful, and particularly not necessarily, will sort of make a good progress in the spiritual journey, in the spiritual path, according to the teachings of the Buddha. That understanding, that realization, that those wisdom should be, what you call the conjoined or the supported by the what you call the ethical conduct, ethical way of living, and that is a very crucial part of the teachings of the Buddha. And third group of the teachings that the Buddha had given, more like a tools, more like a instrument or tools, as a meditation as a tools, how to make the first two, the wisdom and the ethics, are part of our, our way of living, who we are and what we are. And that third part of the teachings is called meditation. Meditation in the sense, to familiarize, to get used to it, to familiarize. Familiarize in the sense, make it part of ourselves. So that is the third part. So entire the teachings of the Buddha can be looked at into these three topics or these three categories. There are several different ways to put the teachings of the Buddha into different categories or different sections, and this is the one way to look at the entire the teachings of the Buddha, into three categories: wisdom, ethics, and technically called third one is called meditation. In Tibetan, Tawa, Jepa, Gomba, Tagom, Jesum. Tawa, quite often translated in English, saying the view, view, which we saw last, last Tuesday evening. when Buddha taught to his followers, what's the technically called the Noble Eightfold Paths. There are 8 things, 8 sort of the things that his followers should apply in their lives, and out of those 8, the 2 are very much the focus on the right view, right thought. Those 2 out of the 8, those 2, right view and right thought, that we look at last Tuesday evening. And so I lost that point. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. Just to remind ourselves that the verses that I read last the Tuesday evenings, the section that I read was the path. It is starting from verse 273, and it continues more further. And I read verse 277, 78, and 79. These 3 verses relation to the cultivation of wisdom or right view. And the first verse 277 was focused on having understanding, having realization of nature of impermanence. Nature of impermanence. All the things and events around us, within us, and ourselves are impermanence. And for the follower of the teachings of the Buddha, that understanding, the understanding of nature of impermanence, is something very crucial, very important. And that verse 277 is, and 278 and 79 are more like focusing on saying that all 77, these 2 verses, I will just briefly talk these 2, all to see, to understand that all things and events are, come into being, come into existence, dependent on many, many different factors, many different causes, conditions, and so forth. There isn't a single thing, there isn't a single event, come into being, come into existence in and of itself. In and of itself, or another term is used, inherent, intrinsic. There isn't. And for the follower of the teachings of the Buddha, understanding that nature, that all things and events are lack or absence or empty of the inherent or intrinsic entity or nature as they are and what they are, and that understanding is something very, very important understanding. So some of these, another important wisdom to be cultivated, to be enhanced, that things and events around us and within us, they all have a potential. They all have a potential to, to bring or to create difficulties or challenges or dukkha, suffering. They all have that kind of potential, and these are some of the most important wisdoms to be cultivated, as a follower of the teachings of the Buddha, and this what I mentioned in the last Tuesday. Now this evening reading will start from the chapter which is called awareness, and it starts from verse 21. Our reading, my reading, I'll start from from that chapter, verse 49, which is quite nice verse to read and to look at that. As a bee gathering nectar does not harm or disturb the color and the fragrance of the flower, so do the wise move through the world. So here talking about having this mind and the body, having this mind and body, and particularly human mind and the body, as human existence that we are, and these two, the minds and bodies, need things for their well-beings. Physically, have a good health, and mentally have a good, sort of mental state, and the basic sort of necessities like food, shelter, medicines, friendships, social connections, and many other things. And as here the analogy is given, saying like the bees, the bees when they gather the nectar from the flower, without disturbing the color, without disturbing the elegance, the beauty of the flowers, simply extracting the nectar that they need, and then moving to the next flowers, and so on and so forth. Similar to that, while we live in this in this planet, in this world, obviously, we need to gather our necessities: food, shelter, medicines, friendships, and so on and so forth. And when we gather those, our necessities, it is helpful, useful, gather them without causing, deliberately without causing pains and the difficulties to the others and their environments and their possessions, their belongings. And that is something very, very useful and helpful to learn. When you talk about the ethics, we're talking about basically, in a very basic level, intentionally, not harming others. That is the basic, the bottom line. And this verse, which is very here, the Buddha said, so do the wise, the people who are wise, move through the world. Move in the sense live their life in the world, in the community, in the society, in the family, live in that manner. The manner of minimum intentionally not harming, not causing harm to others. Like the bees, extracts and nectars from the flowers without disturbing the colors, and all the beauties of the flowers. And that is something which useful and helpful to learn. As a human beings, and as I mentioned the other day, living in a human society, living in a human community, we can learn to live in that manner. It may not happen overnight, but if we very, put effort, very mindful, very, fully, sort of the awareness is within us, we can learn. We can learn to live our life in that manner, which is something useful, helpful, minimum intentionally not harming others. So then the verse 51, as a beautiful flower without the fragrance is disappointing. So are wise words without right action. And this is quite a nice one. I'll read the next one, which both they have together. As a beautiful flower with a delightful fragrance is pleasing. So is wise and lovely speech when matched with the right action. So these are the very, very, very nice verses. Quite often, when we encounter certain spiritual path, certain religious thing, we may learn the expressions, the chantings, the verses, and we may even learn very sophisticated philosophies, the profound explanations, and so on and so forth. It is perfectly possible we may not live our life according to those, deep philosophies, nice verses, and so on and so forth. What here is talking about is, try to live our lives when according to the words what you are saying, those beautiful verses, those beautiful expressions, those beautiful, profound philosophies, that alone is not enough. Learn to live, the life with, according to those philosophies, according to those beautiful expressions, nice expressions, gentle expressions, and that is what here, these two verses, as I said just a few minutes ago, here it is not saying we should do everything overnight, but in the gradual, and with the consistency, with the continuation, that is the thing, and that will gradual, they will make, the changes. Gradual change will take, particularly these kind of, the mental, the transformation, the transformation will not going to happen, suddenly or within in overnight. It will take time, bit by bit, So that's something very useful, because very often, when we encounter these beautiful, expressions like in the religious or beautiful, profound philosophies or views, we just caught up ourselves in that level, but not unable to go more deeper level, deeper in the sense, to take ourselves, the activities of our body, speech, and mind to immerse in those, the philosophies, those beautiful expressions, like, for example, in the teachings of the Buddha, as we have seen, many, we have this expression saying, all living creatures are equal, the equal in the sense, like myself, equal as myself, to have the right to have happiness and to have right be free from difficulties, dukkhas, and very beautiful expressions. But those beautiful expressions, if they stay in a just beautiful, nice, gentle expression, not in an actual action, then, although it is nice expression, rather than saying very harsh words, but the actual taste is not is not there. If we are unable to put into practice, actual the practice in our daily lives, in our everyday lives, that sort of things, which is one of the interfaith, the gathering that I join. So in the interfaith gathering, different spiritual traditions or religious tradition coming together, usually have a big group of spiritual traditions have the Abrahamic religious tradition, or believing in a God or some kind of supernatural being, and the small group like people who are following the teachings of the Buddha, not believing like that sort of things, and very often have this conversation, I had several times with several great teachers from the different spiritual traditions. Of course, they have a tremendous sense of, devotion or faith or sense of duty towards God, and me not believing that kind of existence of that kind of, what you call the supernatural being. But, over the years, for many, many years, learned, studied, meditated, tried to put into practice, saying that all living creatures are very, very dear, very, very important, in certain extents, more important than one's own, the well-beings, and have this, sometimes have a nice sharing, the one group, the God, the love, sort of, being close to the God, being have a tremendous sense of faith, devotion, or whatever those towards God, and on the other hand, here the Buddhists and some of other who do not believe that, saying the living beings, living creatures are something most important to be cherished, to be experienced or shared as a very dear, and have a initially it seems there's a big sort of difference, but when the conversation built on, then come down to the quite sometimes quite, in a certain extent, it is the same. When you say the Abrahamic religious tradition saying, that God is the most merciful, and most on all those have a tremendous sense, and the living beings, living creatures are, its creator, or it's created by itself, and therefore, if you love God, you should also love to the living beings. So having sometimes quite nice, the conversations end up. So the point what I'm making here is, learning how to live, our lives according to these nice, profound, beautiful teachings, as these verses are, explaining to us. Just one verse which I want to read. Yeah. This one. I have one marked, but it's not there. As many heaps of flowers to wholesome can be during. Yeah. So next verse, which I'm going to read, which is important, nice to this connection. It says this: as many garlands can be made. Verse 53 in the same chapter. As many garlands can be made from a heap of flowers, so too much that is wholesome can be done during this human existence. And that is really, really nice verse, saying that the human existence that we have, this mind and, the body, as I mentioned the other day, the human existence, particularly the human, the mind, or the human intelligence, emotions, are extremely rich, extremely capable, and extremely, sensitive, and so forth. Compared to many other, millions of different species on this planet, sharing the same planet where we are, as far as we know, the human beings, in terms of their mental capacity, intellectually and emotionally, is the most sort of capable, most sophisticated, and the rich, the mental states, other animals may have, but compared to the humans, the humans are, much advanced and more profound. And along that, humans build this, developed cultures and sophisticated cultures and language and so on and so forth. So in this case, here, when you talk, the analogy is, as many garlands can be made from a heap of flowers. So here, all these things that we have, like a heap of flowers that we have, this human existence. Our minds, our emotions, our intelligence, our thoughts, our cultures, and the societies, all those thousands of years of history, learning, all those things. This like a heap of flowers that we have, right? This mind and body. And from that beautiful heap of flowers, a person who is skilled to make beautiful garlands, many beautiful garlands, to put on head, to put on hands, to offer to those statues, or to put in where used in many different ways. In India, still they do. Fresh flowers is something they use for many, many different purposes. When I was in India, the southern India, most of my life in India is South India, and South India, the women, they put fresh jasmine, the flowers. Sometimes put nice garland, in a sort of string. Sometimes just one or two pieces, they just put them. Because of that smell, when you travel in the bus, entire bus. In those days, the mainly men, they smoke. But because of the ladies, that beautiful, nice, this white, mainly white, sometimes have a little bit pinkish color, jasmine, and that fragrance, that smell goes around. They use for example, this at least 3 or 4 times a year, they have this, ritual celebration, mainly different animals, of course, mainly cows, but also different animals. And they will really, in the morning, they will, in front of the door, outside the doorstep, they will draw beautiful drawings, and then they put nice flowers everywhere. So the flower is something very, very important, things for the day-to-day usage. They greet people with the flowers. They take flowers to the grave when they visit, their ancestors, and so on and so forth. So this saying, this beautiful, a heap of flower. From that, making many different, the beautiful garlands for many different purposes. And like that, this human existence that we have it like a beautiful, and like a nice, beautiful heap of flowers. We can make many beautiful, the garlands for many different, purposes. And that is, and one of the Tibetan teachers have said, if we don't utilize this human existence more in a constructive manner, here the term is used, wholesome, so too much of this wholesome can be done during this human existence. This Tibetan teacher, one of the Tibetan teachers said, if we don't utilize this mind and body, this human mind and body, more in a constructive, more in a wholesome manner, then there isn't that much difference from the other species on this planet. In certain extents, even worse. So therefore, there's this particular expression, mi shazuk chukki dushechen. That means mi shazuk. That means having this human, the body, but like an animal mental state. What does that mean? That means just eating, sleeping, and going to bathroom. That animals, they do very well in certain cases. So that sort of things, human existence, that we have is something very, very, quite often the Buddhist teachers, like this great Indian master Nagarjuna, he called the human existence is a precious existence, a precious existence. Precious in the sense, because based on this human existence that we have, we can do amazing things to ourselves as well as to others. Therefore, the human existence is called precious human existence. So that here, this verse, the 53 is really, really beautiful, the verse to, to say that. Okay, now I'm moving to a slightly different, different, another, what you call the different verse, different chapter. This is how to make this human existence, our human existence as some kind of constructive, some kind of meaningful, some kind of useful and helpful, at least initially to ourselves, and then gradually to extend to others. And here, one of the most important tools that we can have, that we can apply, is the awareness. And that is what here, the chapter that we just read, and the earlier part of that chapter is, which I'm going to read a few verses, this one. Verse 22 that I'm going to read. The wise being fully alive, rejoicing in appreciative awareness, and abide delighting in this capacity. So being aware of this the human existence that we have, which has a tremendous capacity, tremendous potential. That awareness is something very, very important. If we just take for granted, if we just ignore or not to pay attention, what that this human the human mind and body are capable, that have how much great potential they have, then we may always try to seek, try to search for something outside to make us, to fulfill our yearning and our wishes. All the time looking something outside. Constantly, continuously searching for, outside. And that is, like one of the Indian master used these nice analogies, saying a destitute person who is completely unaware of under his, what you call the, the house, the floor, completely unaware of under his, the house floor, there is a huge lump of gold, but the person is still destitute, suffer with poverty, not having enough things to eat, not having enough things to wear and so forth, and constantly going out to the cities to search for that. But in reality, under that, his floor, there is a big lump of gold waiting there. Similar to that, within ourselves, within this mind and body, there is a tremendous sense of, the richness to fulfill our yearning and the longing. But if we are not aware of that, then we will never never completely going to be fulfilled our yearning and longing. Because what we get, the happiness or fulfillment from the outside, they always have a limit. No matter whatever we get from the outside, money, fame, friendship, whatever we get, they have a limit how much they can fulfill our yearning, our needs. That's not their fault, it is the nature. It is not the fault of our friends, it is not the fault of our parents, it's not the fault of our money or the fame or anything. It is their nature. They don't have the capacity completely, fully fulfill our the yearning and the longing. But if we utilize our inner resources, thoughts, emotions, intelligence, in a proper manner, they have the capacity to fulfill. So therefore, this awareness is very, very important. Being aware of, in this case, being aware of this human existence that we have is something very, very meaningful, resourceful, have great potential, and so forth. Yeah, that's really something. Here it says, the wise being fully alive, rejoice in appreciative awareness, and abide delighting in this capacity. Then there's a tremendous sense of satisfaction. When we utilize our inner resources, then there's a genuine satisfaction. When we use the outside resources, of course, they will give us some temporary, the happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction. But as I mentioned earlier, they can't give us the long-lasting satisfaction or the fulfillment. So that sort of things, which is very, so awareness is something very, very important. If we are aware of, what we are saying, what we are doing, what we are thinking in our daily lives, in our everyday lives, either alone or with the people, with the family, with the children, that being aware of, our activities of our body, speech, and mind, how they are, how we interact with the other living beings, with the other living creatures. Then, there's a tremendous sense of, as here, on the one hand, there's a sense of abides, delighting in this capacity. There's a sense of, delightness. And here another term is used, the term is used, wise being fully alive. And that is useful, fully alive. When we, many of us, we are not aware of, I'm alive. Only when our close friends, close relatives, or somebody whom we know passed away, we say, most of the time we are not aware of that. We are alive. We just act like robots. Therefore, very little sort of appreciation. I'm still alive. One of the Tibetan masters, Kadamba masters, 11th century Tibetan masters, every morning when he wakes up, he says, wow, that's a miracle. I'm still alive. With that awareness, then the day, the day activities, the day sort of, roll in activities, whatever. With that kind of awareness, then there's a genuine appreciation. Sense of joy is there. In this body, there are billions of cells are functioning, and one of the, the many years ago, one time I watched, the one documentary talking about the body cells, how they, divide and how they function, and it says that the presenter, it says, it is a miracle, not many, occasionally those cells goes wrong, but not all the time. And that's a miracle. Millions of different cells are interacting each other. Most of the time, they go very smoothly. And that is a miracle. And when I heard that, wow, that is real teaching. So that sort of things. Awareness is very, very important. Awareness will act as a mirror that we can look at, we can reflect on the activities of our body, speech, and mind. As I said earlier, most of us, when we start our day, we all more or less, the very few things we may remember. I need to do this, I need to do that. Most of the time, we just, work as a robot, just carry on. As soon as you woke up, just where's the coffee maker? Then just go to put a few coffee spoons on, and then make that, and then have it, and day start, and maybe aware of in the evening, I'm in a pub, so what pint I'm going to have then? Not very much. And then life goes like that. Not very much aware of all these beautiful things around us and all these amazing capacities within us. Just, carrying without any sort of notion, any kind of awareness. And that is not very productive for one's own sake and for also sake of the society. This word which I thought is, Indian, some of the Indian philosophers, they used more than, the 2,000, 3,000 years ago to describe to the human beings, living beings, as a consumer. Sawabo in Tibetan, consumer. If we end up our life as a consumer, then it's quite sad. Not as a contributor, but simply as a consumer. So that this awareness is very, very important part of the the teachings of the Buddha. Buddha constantly taught to his followers. Sometimes these days they're called the mindfulness or the awareness as one of the main tools to how to live their life more constructively, more ethically within the family, within the society. Because the awareness will help to the individuals if they are, if their life, if the life is, if they are not living in a more ethical or constructive manner, then you will, what you call the, if you apply the awareness, then you will see that that's happening. If we don't apply awareness, then we will not aware of that. So this is very important tool. The awakened ones, firm in their resolve, vigorously apply themselves and know freedom from bondage, liberation, and a true security. So the application when it says awakened ones, this is referring to those fully those awakened beings, or if I use the term, those enlightened beings, awakened ones, the awakened ones, or in this case the historical Buddha, or the awakened ones, referring to those enlightened beings. They are called awakened. Awakened in that case, awakened in the sense, the compassion and the wisdoms are fully nurtured. Compassion and wisdoms are fully cultivated. And in that sense, awakened ones, awakened or enlightened in the Buddhist understanding, the context, awakened or enlightened in the sense the compassion and the wisdoms are fully nurtured. And that is something, useful to be aware of that. Our mental state at this level, our wisdoms and the compassions are not fully nurtured, although they are present, they are there, but in a more like a potential level, more like a seed level, not very much nurtured, not very much enhanced. And these can be enhanced, these can be nurtured, and these are the main sources. The compassion and the wisdoms are the main sources that really make us happy, that really make us to fulfilled, to fulfilled, to really, fulfill our yearning and longing. And that's what earlier I was talking about, utilizing our inner resources, At the moment, they are in a form of seeds, or they are in a form of very weak states, but these can be nurtured. These can be enhanced, through the different techniques, different techniques. As a human beings, we are we are capable, we have these, the abilities to nurture these mental states. Animals have a very, very limited, being able to nurture like compassion and wisdoms. And that's what here, which meaning of the awakened ones, even though at this stage, we may not be awakened one, but we can make ourselves awakened ones through nurturing, enhancing compassion and wisdom. And in that way, through nurturing that, then here the term is used, the true security, or another term is used, liberation, freedom from bondage, liberation in the sense, that deep-rooted psychologically fear, concern, worries, all these deep down, the difficulties, predicaments. These can be, can be sort of released, or can be, eliminated, can be, free from, if we enhanced compassion and wisdom. And true security, when there's no fear, when there's no, this kind of sense of concern, sense of deep fear, worry, the anger, jealousy, then the true security, true sort of sense of, the sense of, security, or the sense of happiness will be experienced. External conditions, external things may, reduce some of our those fears, worries, and so forth, but they do not have the capacity, free us from deep-rooted fears and worries. In certain extents, these external things that we collect, things that we gathered, to make us a little bit secure, they may cause us problem, insecurity. That's which one of my earlier, the culture shock, in the West. In the West, you have this, the culture and this system, which on the one hand it is good system. On the other hand, I find it's very like a, the vicious circle. That is, I might be wrong, but in my knowledge, in my view, the system of buying what you call buying what you call now I'm losing my English. No. Anyway, my mind is not working now. What you call it? Insurance. Insurance. And sometimes you have to buy this insurance, but you have to buy second insurance to make sure this one is okay. But when you have insurance, then when your car is damaged, of course they will pay money, but next year your insurance gone up. It is like, hello. When I heard that, you have to have second insurance to make sure the first insurance is good enough. So anyway, so this, the dealing with our inner resources is something very, very helpful, useful that Buddha had taught. So like the raising awareness, is something very useful to do. Oh yeah, so this evening's my blah blah. So if you have one or two questions, I will take one or two questions. You have a question? Okay. Use this one. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you, Geshe, for your words. My question goes to: what is the best form to nurture our wisdom and compassion when one is on stage to learn to enhance? What are the
one is
on stage to enhance? How to enhance? Is engage? Okay. Seeing what is the best form to nurture our wisdom and compassion.
so the wisdom and compassion, to nurture the wisdom and compassion, in fact, you don't need to be a Buddhist, you don't need to come to the Buddhist temple, you can nurture compassion and wisdom even in your daily lives, because there are so many things that we can learn when you are interacting with your families, with your colleagues, with your, communities. To nurturing, to enhancing wisdom and compassion. Like, for example, in the wisdom in here, the verse that we read last week, wisdom to understand nature of impermanence. To do that, to develop, nurture that wisdom, don't need to sit on a meditation cushion. Look around. It shows nature of impermanence all the time. All the time. Almost everything around us, within us, and ourselves shows the nature of impermanence. But we are not aware of that. We just blissfully, carry on. And the same as to nurture compassion. Again, to nurture compassion, all the time there's an opportunity to nurture compassion. All the time. If we look at within ourselves, this mind and body, if you're aware of this, mind and body, it is not perfect. It is going through all the time challenges, difficulties, and the person who's holding that, going through those difficulties, and that is where you can express compassion. And you look around people, same in the situation. So to nurture compassion and wisdom, you don't have to sit on meditation cushion. All around, they all shows, give us the opportunity, give us the chance to nurture these two. Only thing is, we need to be aware of that. Okay? Good. Another question? Yeah.
Geshe Tashi. My question is basically, I'm just wondering that the Buddha has indirectly taught veganism in the text of moral ethics. Because I'm wondering, it seems like the way the teaching of the moral ethic is very much, in a way, very parallel to where how many people who have a different ideas and different understanding of veganism, those who follows. But I'm saying the principle and the ethics of veganism seems like a very parallel to what the Buddha has taught basically in the ethics. I'm just wondering Geshe-la's thought. Thank you.
The Buddha himself said in many occasions, the entire his teaching is based on the notion or the understanding of compassion. So the ethics or the moral ethics, from the basic level to some of the most advanced ethical practice, they all are based on compassion. So that means compassion means understanding or realizing other beings, other living creatures, not just the humans, but also other living creatures, their experience, their feelings, their rights, their wishes, their yearnings are as important as one's own rights, yearnings, wishes, feelings, and rights. So to talk about compassion, the understanding of compassion, expression of compassion, feeling of compassion, will always, it always involve thinking about other living creatures, feelings, thoughts, well-beings, without taking into account that other living beings, feelings, thoughts, the rights, there's a very little compassion to be practiced. There's a very little compassion to be expressed. So when the historical Buddha taught, explained entire his teachings and philosophies and practices that he taught his followers are very much based on compassion. And here the ethical, moral ethics, whatever under which category that we put, precepts, the monastic the vows or whatever, must based on the compassion. Okay? Okay. So then we will leave it here. Yeah. So next Tuesday, if you would like to come, will be the last Tuesday evening, this program, and with me, the Tuesday class. And as I mentioned, I'm going to talk the third part of this topic, that is meditation, how those wisdom and compassions are nurtured through the meditation. So that's what I'm going to talk next Tuesday. Okay. So now, end of this program, end of this evening. So the dedication in page 34. Oh yeah. Chanjo Sancho Remboche Maje Panam Ke Gyuruche Keba Nyamba Mebaya Kone Kondo Pewajo Tobze Changshin Chamgun Jawe Den Zenjo Pewe Kunsu Tombo Zen chosom kuwe lengme to pa da so de je gondo sha ben sho kare rave korwe shinkam de pandan dewa malu jongwe chere sewa tenzin jazo shabe sede pado tengyo. Oh yeah, thank you.